I guess I was destined to be an entrepreneur from a young age. I was the kid with the snow shovel walking down the street, shoveling people's driveways. In the summer, I bought an old lawnmower, cut people's grass, washing cars, had a paper route for 7 years. I did all that stuff before entrepreneur was something that we kind of is part of our daily lexicon now. It didn't exist back then. It was just, the reason I did that stuff is I was one of 6 kids, and if you wanted an allowance, go earn it. That was the only way you had some money. So I didn't realize that I was going to be self-employed, but I guess it was part of my, my upbringing. Being an entrepreneur is hard work. It's really hard work. And you know what? You take all the risks, and you don't understand that yet until you're in the situation where you're starting your company, you're looking for financing, office space possibly, even just buying some technology, computers and whatnot, the hours you got to put in before you get your first order, the customer's satisfaction you have to uphold, what you want to deliver to your customers, all those things. That's constant and never ending. It's a 24-hour-a-day job. Number 12, and the beauty about these numbers, because if I'm boring you, you'll know how soon I'll be finished. Okay, it's kind of one of the reasons I did it too. Make sure you have a long enough runway. Now, what does that mean? Well, I mean, people are in a rush. As an advisor at Invest Ottawa, I get to see a lot of students coming in and people just graduating, they're going to go into business. And I asked them about their business, and I go, what kind of experience do you have? They go, I have none about this particular topic they're going in. I'm going, really? You have no experience in this? No, but I'm going to be the world's greatest. When in fact, the chances are they're not going to be. You all have jobs now. What I encourage you to do is, it takes a long time to get a business up to, as I call it, profitability and getting it to be remotely successful. Make sure that wherever you're working now, I don't care if it's McDonald's or whatever, make sure you understand what's going on in those organizations. How did they get to be so big? And you're going to just keep piling that knowledge into your back pocket because you're going to need it at some time. I was a truck driver. One of the things I learned, and I built my companies around it, was the fact that every trucking company that I worked for at the time were essentially project-based. We'd start the day, we'd load the truck, I'd deliver furniture all day. At the end of the day, I'm done. During that course of the day, we had to get furniture into some weird places, fridges into places they didn't fit, with a lot of decision-making that had to happen in a hurry because the customer's standing there wanting their stuff in the place. Touring rock and roll shows, I had to leave Washington, D.C. and be in Chicago within so many hours, 36 hours. How you got there. All these things are now, came back and I started to apply them, and I didn't realize to my own business because I developed my companies so that they were project-based. And the beauty is you have a start and you have an end of all sorts of projects, even long-term projects. But it became a way of doing things that you can measure as you go along. So look as good as you sound. And you're going to, as you start into your business and even your career, you're going to tell people how great you are, how great your product is, how great your service is. You're wonderful, you're excellent, you need to hire us. Yet you may not be living up to that aspect in terms of how you look. This is my uniform. Okay, I know I could have come more casual, but I was to prove a point here today. Most of my clients for years would tell me, don't wear a suit. I always wore a suit to the meetings. And my clients were Johnson & Johnson's and Procter & Gamble's and Bayer's of the world, Bayer Aspirin. And I would go in and they would be in khakis. And as the worst thing that happened to men's attire anyways was business casual, because there was no lower limit. It just kind of went down from this to, hey, anything goes. And I can't tell you, a couple of times it happened, and particularly at Bayer one day I walked in and they were always telling me, don't wear a suit, just come casual. I walked in and the guy I'm meeting was a VP and he's in a suit. I'm going, well, that's kind of interesting. What are you in a suit for? He says, oh, we got some guests. And what it was their international managers had all come in for a conference and decided to sit in on the presentation. I would have been the only guy in casuals. How long does it take to form a first impression? 2 seconds? 10? 7? Or 15? So let's start with 2 seconds. How many people think 2 seconds? Okay. How many people? 10? Not many. 7? Okay, a few more. And 15. All right, well, most of you are wrong. It takes 7 seconds to form a first impression. And the thing is, there's a study that was done that it can take upwards of 18 months to change that first impression, or up to 8 visits or contacts to change it. Pretty familiar with the story of Acres of Diamonds? Okay, yep. It was about an African farmer, subsistence living, barely eking out. I mean, going out to this hardscrabble kind of property he owned, and year after year, just barely eking out a living. And he kept hearing that throughout Africa, these great diamond discoveries were being made, and fortunes, vast fortunes were being accumulated because people were finding diamonds. So finally, he had enough and sold his farm for next to nothing, of course, because it wasn't a great farm, and headed off in search of his diamonds. Never found them, died penniless. The person that bought his farm, again, was doing a little better, was having a little more productivity off his land. But one day there was a businessman from town came to visit and was for tea. And they were sitting having tea, and the businessman said, "Do you know what those rocks are on top of your mantle?" And the farmer says, "No, those are just some of the bigger ones and nicer ones I picked up. They're all over the property. The nice ones are really in the creek bed." He says, "So I just put them up here. They're kind of decorations." The thing is, the businessman said, "Those are diamonds." And so diamonds in their natural state are not the shiny baubles that we see. A lot of times they're very rough and yellowed or dark or even black in some cases. And until they're polished, do they become the gemstone. That farm went on to be one of the largest diamond mines ever discovered. And the point is the first farmer had all this. He had his acres of diamonds. He already owned it. Yet he didn't know what he was looking for. He wasn't the expert. And he went off and died penniless. This is my favorite saying all the time. Be curious, be forever curious. You can ask my 3 kids, what's Dad saying? Be curious, be forever curious. Again, you have the opportunity here to do that. Don't rush yourself out of this institution. You're here and say, okay, I got 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, I'm out of here. Use this opportunity to learn your craft. One of the mistakes I made was leaving here. I mean, it paid off in the end, but I'll tell you what, man, I did a lot of studying afterwards, the hard way. I mean, a balance sheet. All the puts and takes on a balance sheet, I had no idea what it was about. I had to figure that out on my own. You're here, don't just snooze fest through the classes. Seriously understand how those items on the balance sheet in marketing all play in your future. This is an opportunity because I'll tell you, you'll do a heck of a lot more work trying to figure it out on your own later when you're here now. So make sure you take advantage of that. How many people are familiar with the Pareto principle? Very good. Someone. 80-20 rule. You all know it. And Vilfredo Pareto was an Italian economist back in the 19th century. He discovered this rule. It's actually called the law of vital few. That's the real name for it. And what he set out to do was to understand in Italy who owned all the land. And so he did this exercise, he did a survey and figured it out that 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the population there. So he thought that was kind of like strange, but maybe not consistent. So he continued to do this throughout Europe and found out that the numbers were pretty consistent, that a small number of people were responsible for a significant land mass. And it actually, the law of vital few doesn't specifically state 80-20, but it tends to be the closest number. All it means is something smaller is responsible for a larger outcome. And you'll find throughout your business, and this is where you get to save time and be more efficient in your business, is 80% of your profit is going to come from 20% of your clients. 80% of your profit's going to come from 20% of your products or services. And when I go back to keeping things simple, that's what you need to constantly monitor, to find out where you're making your money and narrow your focus down and maintain that kind of high ratio, that instead of wasting your time on low margin activities or things that consume a tremendous amount of time with little return, you need to start applying this rule. 75% of businesses listed for sale do not sell. The point, the 80 is 80% of most small business owners' wealth is tied up in their business, and yet it can't sell. Figure that out. The 66 was my target. I wanted to have 2/3 of my wealth outside of my company. So in the event that I was one of the 75%, I had a target, and I could still retire when I wanted to retire, which was 8.5 years ago. I made sure that I got that money out of the company. So that stopped me from renting the bigger office, getting the new furniture, buying the real coolest car. I had some great cars, but I could have bought greater cars. It stops you from doing a lot of things because you know what? Freedom to me was far more important than everything else. Okay, I'm going to leave you with one final quote. Entrepreneurship is living a few years of your life like most people won't, hard work and everything, so that you can spend the rest of your life like most people can't.